July 15, 2013. The morning sun cast long shadows across the suburban streets of Lakewood, Colorado, as the Morrison family prepared for what would become their final vacation together. David Morrison, 42 years old, was methodically checking items off his camping list while sipping his morning coffee from a mug that read, "World's Greatest Dad," a Father's Day gift from his twins just a month earlier. David had worked as a senior accountant for Mountain Peak Mining Corporation for 8 years, climbing his way up from a junior position through dedication and an eye for detail that his supervisors valued highly. His meticulous nature extended to everything he did, including their annual camping trips. Every piece of equipment was inspected, every meal planned, every emergency scenario considered. His wife Sarah, 39, was in the kitchen preparing sandwiches for the road trip while simultaneously organizing activities for their 5-day adventure. As a second-grade teacher at Bear Creek Elementary School, Sarah had a natural gift for keeping children engaged and excited about learning. Her students adored her, and her colleagues often sought her advice on handling difficult situations. She approached their family camping trips with the same enthusiasm and organizational skills she brought to her classroom. The twins, Jake and Emma, both 8 years old, were practically vibrating with excitement in the living room. Jake had spread his collection of toy cars across the coffee table, carefully selecting which ones would accompany him on the mountain adventure. He was fascinated by anything with wheels and dreamed of becoming a race car driver when he grew up. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, writing in her new diary with a purple gel pen. She had begged her mother for the diary after seeing older girls at school carrying them, and Sarah had surprised her with a beautiful leather-bound journal for her birthday in May. Emma took her writing very seriously, documenting everything from what she ate for breakfast to conversations with her best friend Ashley. For this camping trip, she had declared she would write about every single thing they saw and did. "Daddy," Emma called out, looking up from her diary. "How do you spell adventure?" David smiled, setting down his coffee. "Adventure. Are you writing about our trip already?" "I'm writing about how excited I am," Emma replied, tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on forming each letter perfectly. "I want to remember everything." The Morrison family had been taking annual camping trips to Rocky Mountain National Park since the twins were 4 years old. It had become more than just a vacation. It was a sacred family tradition that strengthened their bond and created memories they would treasure forever, or so they believed. David had first discovered his love for these mountains as a 10-year-old boy, when his own father had brought him camping to teach him about self-reliance and respect for nature. Now, 28 years later, he was continuing that tradition, with his own children, never imagining that this trip would be their last. At 11 in the morning, they loaded their blue Ford Explorer with camping gear that had been accumulated over years of outdoor adventures. The large tent that could comfortably sleep 4. Sleeping bags rated for mountain temperatures. A camp stove, cooler, lanterns, and enough food for 5 days. David had even packed a small telescope, hoping to show the children Saturn's rings, if the mountain skies were clear. Sarah carefully placed Emma's pink backpack in the vehicle, making sure it was easily accessible. Emma had insisted on bringing her school supplies and diary, planning to draw pictures of wildlife and document their experiences. The backpack, with Emma embroidered in purple thread on the front pocket, had been a back-to-school gift from her grandmother the previous September. The 4-hour drive to Rocky Mountain National Park was filled with the usual family road trip activities. Jake and Emma played 20 questions, counted out-of-state license plates, and took turns choosing songs on the radio. Sarah had prepared a travel activity book with word searches and crossword puzzles adapted for 8-year-olds. David pointed out geological formations and explained how the Rocky Mountains had been formed millions of years ago. They arrived at the Moraine Park Campground at 2:15 in the afternoon. The campground sat in a beautiful valley surrounded by snow-capped peaks, with the Big Thompson River meandering through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Elk could often be seen, grazing in the early morning and evening hours, and the sound of their bugling calls echoed across the valley during mating season. The Morrison family was assigned to campsite number 47, a spot David had specifically requested because of its proximity to the river and its stunning view of the Continental Divide. The site offered both privacy and easy access to hiking, trails that were perfect for children. Setting up camp was a well-choreographed routine they had perfected over 4 years of practice. David and Jake worked together to assemble the tent while Sarah and Emma organized their supplies and set up the camp kitchen. Within 2 hours, they had created a comfortable temporary home in the wilderness. Their first evening was magical. They hiked a short nature trail, where Emma filled 3 pages of her diary with descriptions of blue columbines, Indian paintbrush, and other wildflowers they encountered. Jake discovered that if he sat very still by the river, chipmunks would venture close enough to take crackers directly from his outstretched hand. As darkness fell, David built a campfire and they roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. Sarah read stories by lantern light while the twins snuggled close, mesmerized by the dancing flames and the symphony of night sounds in the mountains. Emma wrote in her diary by flashlight, documenting every detail of their perfect day. July 16th and 17th passed in a blur of hiking, fishing, wildlife watching, and family bonding. David taught the children how to identify animal tracks along the muddy riverbank: elk, deer, raccoon, and even what appeared to be mountain lion prints. Sarah helped them start collections of interesting rocks and pressed flowers between the pages of a field guide. On the evening of July 17th, the Morrison family joined other campers around a large communal fire that had become a tradition at Site 47's end of the campground. Emma proudly showed her diary to Lucy, a 10-year-old girl from the neighboring campsite, reading aloud her descriptions of a golden eagle they had spotted soaring above the peaks. "You're a really good writer," Lucy told Emma. "My teacher says I should keep a diary too, but I never know what to write about." "Just write about everything that makes you happy," Emma advised with the wisdom of an 8-year-old who had discovered the joy of recording life's precious moments. Jake entertained the other children by demonstrating the wooden whistle David had helped him carve that afternoon. The whistle produced a clear, sweet note that echoed across the valley, and Jake was immensely proud of his accomplishment. At 9:30, as the fire died down to glowing embers, the Morrison family said their goodnights to their camping neighbors and retired to their tent. Sarah tucked the twins into their sleeping bags while David secured their food in the bear-proof containers required by park regulations. "Tomorrow we're going to hike to Alberta Falls," David told his children as they settled in for the night. "It's a beautiful waterfall, and if we're lucky, we might see some bighorn sheep on the rocks." "I'm going to write about everything," Emma murmured sleepily, clutching her diary to her chest. Those were the last words the Morrison family would speak as free people. At approximately 2:30 in the morning on July 18th, their lives changed forever. What happened next would remain a mystery for 11 long years, until a small, pink backpack would finally reveal the terrible truth about their disappearance. When the Morrison family failed to check out of their campsite by the required 11 a.m. departure time on July 18th, campground host Robert Chen initially wasn't concerned. Families often ran late, especially when children were involved in packing up camping gear. But by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when there was still no sign of activity at Site 47, Chen decided to investigate. What he discovered sent chills down his spine. The family's tent was partially collapsed, as if it had been hastily and incompletely taken down. Camping equipment was scattered around the site: sleeping bags, cooking utensils, and clothing. Items that appeared to have been dropped or abandoned in haste. The camp chairs were still arranged around the fire pit, which contained the cold ashes of the previous evening's fire. Most puzzling of all, both family vehicles remained in the parking area. David's blue Ford Explorer and Sarah's Honda Civic sat exactly where they had been parked 3 days earlier, with keys still inside and no signs of disturbance. Chen immediately contacted park rangers, who arrived within 20 minutes. Ranger Patricia Williams, a 15-year veteran with extensive search and rescue experience, recognized immediately that this was no ordinary situation. In 15 years of working in these mountains, Williams later told investigators, "I've seen families pack up in a hurry because of weather or sick children, but they don't leave their vehicles behind, they don't leave their keys, and they don't leave." Campsites, looking like the people, just vanished into thin air. By 4 p.m., a full-scale search and rescue operation was underway. The Larimer County Sheriff's Office was notified, and Detective Maria Gonzalez took charge of what would become one of the most puzzling missing persons cases in Colorado history. Detective Gonzalez had 23 years of law enforcement experience, including 12 years specializing in missing persons cases. She had worked everything from runaway teenagers to suspicious disappearances involving domestic violence. But the Morrison case presented unique challenges that defied her experience and training. The initial search focused on the immediate area around the campground. Search and rescue teams, aided by specially trained dogs, combed every trail, every creek bed, and every possible location where a family of 4 might have encountered trouble. The working theory was that the Morrisons had gone for an early morning hike and become lost or injured. However, this theory quickly fell apart under scrutiny. The family's hiking boots were still in their tent. Their day packs, water bottles, and trail maps were undisturbed. If they had gone hiking, they were wearing only the clothes they had, slept in and carrying no supplies whatsoever. Something completely out of character for David Morrison's cautious and methodical approach to outdoor activities. By the end of the first day, over 100 volunteers had joined the search. Local television stations picked up the story, broadcasting photos of the missing family and appealing for information from anyone who might have seen them. The story struck a chord with Colorado families who regularly enjoyed the state's outdoor recreation opportunities. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a child psychologist who volunteered with search and rescue operations, reviewed Emma's diary entries that had been found in the tent. This little girl was clearly happy and excited about the camping trip, Dr. Martinez told Detective Gonzalez. There's nothing in her writing to suggest family problems or any reason they might have left voluntarily. As the search entered its second day, the scope expanded dramatically. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras flew grid patterns over thousands of acres of wilderness. Teams of professional search and rescue specialists rappelled into ravines and searched areas that were inaccessible to ground teams. The Big Thompson River was dragged systematically, based on the theory that the family might have fallen in during a nighttime trip to use the bathroom facilities. But the river was running low due to summer conditions, and experienced divers found no evidence that anyone had recently been in the water. Wildlife experts were consulted about the possibility of animal attacks. Black bears were common in the area, and mountain lions, while rarely seen, were known to inhabit the high country. However, no evidence supported this theory. There were no signs of struggle, no torn clothing, no blood, and no drag marks that would indicate predator involvement. The investigation expanded beyond the wilderness setting. Detective Gonzalez and her team conducted extensive background checks on both David and Sarah Morrison. They interviewed family members, friends, neighbors, and co-workers, looking for any indication of marital problems, financial difficulties, or other issues that might explain a planned disappearance. David's brother, Michael Morrison, flew in from Phoenix, Arizona, where he worked as an engineer for a defense contractor. Michael had always been close to his brother, and he insisted that David would never voluntarily disappear with his family. David was the most responsible person I've ever known, Michael told investigators. He planned everything down to the smallest detail. If he was going to leave his job and disappear with Sarah and the kids, he would have had a plan, money saved, arrangements made. This isn't like him at all. Sarah's sister Jennifer drove up from Colorado Springs to join the search efforts. A nurse at Children's Hospital, Jennifer was equally adamant that her sister would never abandon her teaching job and students without explanation. Sarah lived for those kids in her classroom, Jennifer said. She was already planning activities for the new school year that starts in 6 weeks. She had ordered supplies, arranged field trips, attended summer training workshops. She would never just walk away from all of that. Mountain Peak Mining Corporation, David's employer, provided full cooperation with the investigation. Human Resources. Director Lynn Taylor confirmed that David was a valued employee with no disciplinary issues, no financial problems, and no indication that he was planning to leave his position. David Morrison was one of our most trusted accountants, Taylor told Detective Gonzalez. He had access to sensitive financial information, and we had complete confidence in his integrity. There was never any question about his reliability or honesty. What investigators didn't know, and wouldn't discover for 11 years, was that David's integrity and honesty had made him a target for revenge. As July turned into August, the massive search operation was gradually scaled back. Over Biden, 300 volunteers had participated, covering more than 50 square miles of wilderness. Professional search teams had investigated every possible theory, following up on dozens of reported sightings and tips from the public. Detective Gonzalez expanded the investigation to include the possibility of abduction. She worked with FBI, behavioral analysts to develop profiles of potential suspects, and coordinated with law enforcement agencies across the western United States to check for similar cases or suspicious activities. But no concrete evidence emerged. No ransom demands were received. No witnesses came forward with reliable information about strangers in the area or suspicious activities around the time of the disappearance. In September, 3 months after, the family vanished. The case was officially classified as a cold case and transferred to the Larimer County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit. Detective Gonzalez, who had worked tirelessly on the investigation, was reassigned to new cases, though she never stopped thinking about the Morrison family. "In 23 years of police work," she told her replacement, Detective James Patterson, "I've never had a case that kept me awake at night like this one. 4 people don't just disappear without a trace. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened to that family." The official conclusion, reached after 6 months of intensive investigation, was that the Morrison family had likely died due to exposure, accident, or animal attack in the wilderness, and that their remains had been scattered or consumed by wildlife to the point where they would never be found. This conclusion provided little comfort to the extended Morrison family, who refused to accept that their loved ones would remain forever missing. Michael Morrison established a trust fund to pay for continued private investigation efforts. He maintained a website with photos and information about the missing family members, hoping that someone, someday, would come forward with information. Every year on July 18th, Michael returned to Rocky Mountain National Park to distribute flyers and speak with campers, hoping to find someone who remembered something about that terrible night. He hired 3 different private investigators over the years, but none were able to uncover new leads or evidence. The case appeared destined to remain forever unsolved, joining the ranks of missing persons cases that haunt law enforcement agencies and families across the country. 4 people had simply vanished from the face of the earth, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. What no one realized was that the answers they sought were not hidden in the wilderness of Rocky Mountain National Park. The truth was locked, away in an abandoned building 45 miles away, waiting patiently for 11 years until construction workers would accidentally discover a small, pink backpack that would finally reveal the Morrison family's terrible fate. March 24th, 2024 dawned crisp and clear in the Colorado foothills, with the kind of brilliant blue sky that makes residents feel fortunate to live in such spectacular surroundings. For Tony Martinez, foreman of Rocky Mountain Demolition Company, it was just another day of hard work, tearing down old structures to make way for progress and development. The job site was the former Pineview Hotel, a once grand mountain resort that had been abandoned since 2008 when the previous owners declared bankruptcy during the economic recession. The 3-story building had been a popular destination for Denver families seeking weekend getaways in the mountains, but 16 years of neglect had turned it into a deteriorating eyesore. Rocky Mountain Resorts, a Denver-based development company, had purchased the 40-acre property with plans to build a luxury spa and conference center. The old hotel needed to be demolished before construction could begin on the new facility, which was scheduled to open in 2026. Tony had been working demolition for 12 years, and he approached each job with professional thoroughness. Before any building could be safely torn down, every room needed to be inspected for hazardous materials, valuable items that might have been left behind, and structural issues that could complicate the demolition process. The Pineview Hotel was a maze of guest rooms, conference spaces, storage areas, and mechanical rooms. The basement level was particularly complex, with a network of storage rooms, maintenance areas, and utility spaces that had been added piecemeal over the hotel's 40-year operational history. It was in basement storage room B47 that Tony made a discovery that would finally solve one of Colorado's most puzzling missing persons cases. The room appeared to be a standard hotel storage space, filled with the usual collection of broken furniture, outdated supplies, and miscellaneous items that accumulate in commercial buildings over decades of operation. But as Tony worked to clear the debris, his crowbar struck something that didn't sound like wood or metal. Behind a stack of moldy cardboard boxes, he discovered what appeared to be a hastily constructed false wall. The drywall panels were poorly fitted and secured with screws that showed signs of rust, indicating they had been installed years earlier under less than professional circumstances. Tony's experience with old buildings had taught him to be curious about unusual construction. Sometimes valuable items were hidden behind false walls, or previous owners had concealed damage to avoid costly repairs. He decided to investigate. Using his crowbar to carefully pry away the drywall panels, Tony revealed a small room approximately 8 feet by 8 feet. The space was dark, musty, and filled with spiderwebs that suggested it had been sealed for many years. As his flashlight beam swept across the hidden room, Tony saw something that made his blood run cold. In the far corner, partially hidden under a moldy blanket, was a small pink backpack. Even before he could read the name embroidered on the front pocket, Tony instinctively knew that this discovery was significant. His hands shaking slightly, he used his flashlight to illuminate the purple thread that spelled out Emma across the backpack's front. Tony immediately stopped work and called his supervisor, who in turn contacted the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. Within 45 minutes, Detective Sarah Chen arrived at the demolition site. Detective Chen was a 10-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office who had recently been assigned to the cold case unit. She was familiar with the Morrison family disappearance, having reviewed the case files as part of her orientation to unsolved cases that remained active investigations. Opening the backpack with latex gloves and extreme care, Detective Chen discovered items that confirmed her worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. Emma Morrison's school diary was intact, protected by the leather binding and the dry conditions, in the hidden room. But these weren't the happy camping memories that Emma had been expected to write during her family's vacation. The diary entries revealed a story of terror, desperation, and ultimately tragedy that explained what had really happened to the Morrison family during those final weeks of summer in 2013. As Detective Chen read Emma's increasingly desperate diary entries, she realized that the investigation 11 years earlier had been focused in entirely the wrong location. The Morrison family hadn't disappeared in Rocky Mountain National Park. They had been kidnapped from their campsite and brought to this abandoned hotel, where they had been held captive by someone with a very specific grudge against David Morrison. The diary entries were heartbreaking in their innocence and clarity. Emma had documented their ordeal with the matter-of-fact observations of an 8-year-old who was trying to make sense of an incomprehensible situation. Her writing revealed not only what had happened to the family, but also provided crucial clues about the identity of their captor. Detective Chen immediately secured the scene and called for backup, forensic specialists, and the medical examiner's office. She also placed a call to Michael Morrison in Phoenix, Arizona, knowing that he deserved to hear about this development directly from law enforcement rather than from news reports. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Chen said carefully, "this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about your brother's case. We've made a significant discovery that I need to discuss with you." The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for nearly 10 seconds before Michael Morrison whispered, "Have you found them?" "We found evidence that explains what happened to your brother's family," Detective Chen replied. "I need you to understand that this is not the outcome we had hoped for, but we finally have answers." As forensic specialists processed the hidden room, they found additional evidence that corroborated Emma's diary account. DNA evidence confirmed that all 4 Morrison family members had been in the room for an extended period. Fingerprints found throughout the space were run through national databases, leading to the identification of Marcus Wheeler, a man whose connection to David Morrison had been overlooked during the original investigation. The discovery of Emma's backpack and diary represented a breakthrough that would finally bring justice for the Morrison family and closure for those who had searched for answers for 11 years. But it also revealed a truth more horrible than anyone had imagined about what had happened during those 3 weeks when 4 innocent people had simply vanished from their campsite in the mountains. Emma Morrison's diary entries, written in the careful handwriting of an 8-year-old trying to document the unthinkable, revealed a story that was far more sinister than investigators had ever imagined. As Detective Sarah Chen read through the pages by forensic lighting in the Larimer County Sheriff's Office evidence room, she found herself fighting back tears at the courage and innocence of a child who had tried to record her family's ordeal until the very end. The diary began with Emma's typical enthusiasm and careful attention to detail, but the tone changed dramatically, beginning with the entry dated July 18, 2013. July 18th. Something very scary happened last night. A man came to our tent when it was very dark and everyone was sleeping. He had a big flashlight and something that looked like Daddy's hunting rifle. He told us very quietly that we had to pack our things and come with him, and that if we made any noise or tried to call for help, something very bad would happen to us. Mommy started to cry, but she tried to hide it from me and Jake. Daddy asked the man what he wanted, and the man said that Daddy had ruined his life and now he was going to pay for it. The man made us pack our sleeping bags and some clothes very quickly, and then he made us walk through the dark to a big truck that was parked on the road outside the campground. Jake was shaking and trying not to cry. I held his hand and whispered that everything would be okay, but I was scared too. The man drove us for a very long time on roads that were bumpy and winding. I couldn't see where we were going because it was so dark outside. The subsequent entries revealed that Marcus Wheeler had driven the Morrison family to the abandoned Pineview Hotel, where he had prepared the basement room as a makeshift prison. Wheeler's plan, as revealed through Emma's innocent observations of his phone conversations and angry outbursts, was to hold the family for ransom until Mountain Peak Mining Corporation paid him compensation for what he considered his wrongful termination. July 19th. We are in a scary place that smells like old water and mouse droppings. The man says we are in an old hotel that nobody uses anymore. He put us in a room in the basement that has no windows and only one door. There is one mattress on the floor and some blankets that smell bad. The man brought us some crackers and water bottles, but not very much. The man keeps talking on his cell phone to someone. He gets very angry and yells about money and about how Daddy's work should pay him because of what Daddy did. Daddy keeps trying to talk to the man. He says he is sorry if he hurt the man's feelings, but the man won't listen. He just gets angrier. As the days passed, Emma's entries revealed that the family's situation became increasingly desperate. Wheeler had apparently expected Mountain Peak Mining Corporation to negotiate quickly for the family's release, but the company had refused to engage with someone they viewed as a disgruntled former employee making terrorist threats. July 24th. It has been almost a week since we came to this place. The man is very angry because Daddy's work won't give him the money he wants. He keeps saying bad words and punching the walls. Mommy asks him every day to please let us go, especially me and Jake, because we are just children. But the man says we have to stay until Daddy's work pays him $50,000. Jake cries a lot and he is having bad dreams. Mommy holds us and tells us stories to try to make us feel better. But I can tell she is very scared too. Daddy tries to stay brave for us, but sometimes I see him crying when he thinks we are asleep. The man only brings us food once a day now. Yesterday it was just peanut butter sandwiches and warm water. I am very hungry, and my tummy hurts. Detective Chen's forensic analysis revealed that the family had been held captive for nearly 3 weeks. During that time, Wheeler had become increasingly unstable as his demands were ignored and his plan unraveled. The abandoned hotel provided perfect cover for his crime. The building had been empty for years, and its remote location meant that screams or other sounds would not be heard by potential rescuers. August 1st. Mommy is very sick. She has a fever and she keeps throwing up. She can't eat the food the man brings us, and she mostly just sleeps now. Daddy begs the man to let Mommy go to a doctor, but the man says no. He says if Mommy dies, it will be Daddy's fault for not making his work pay the money. Jake is sick too now. He has diarrhea, and he cries all the time. I try to take care of him like Mommy does, but I don't know how to make him feel better. I found some clean rags in the corner of the room, and I use them to wipe his face when he throws up. The man seems scared now too. He talks to himself and walks around in circles. Sometimes he forgets to bring us food for a whole day. The conditions in the makeshift prison were deteriorating rapidly. The single mattress, shared by 4 people, became contaminated with bodily fluids. The room had no ventilation system, and the summer heat made the basement space stifling and unbearable. With limited food and water and no access to medical care, Sarah Morrison's condition became critical. August 5th. Mommy is very, very sick. She won't wake up very much anymore, and when she does, she doesn't make sense when she talks. Her skin is hot and dry, and she keeps shaking even though it is warm in here. Daddy holds her all the time and whispers in her ear. I think he is telling her that he loves her. Jake is not sick anymore, but he is very scared about Mommy. He keeps asking me if Mommy is going to die, and I tell him no, but I am scared too. I wish I could call Grandpa Mike or Aunt Jennifer to come help us. The man came down today and looked at Mommy. He seemed very upset and scared. He talked on his phone for a long time, walking back and forth and yelling at someone. I heard him say, "This wasn't supposed to happen, and what am I supposed to do now?" Emma's entry dated August 7th, 2013, would be her last. By this time, Sarah Morrison had died from a combination of dehydration, infection, and the severe stress of captivity. Faced with a deceased victim and 3 surviving witnesses who could identify him, Marcus Wheeler made the decision that would haunt investigators and the Morrison family forever. August 7th. Mommy died this morning. Daddy is crying and won't stop holding her. Jake doesn't understand what happened. He keeps asking Mommy to wake up, but she won't. The man is very scared now. He keeps walking around and talking to himself. He says this is all Daddy's fault and now everything is ruined. He says we can't stay here anymore and we have to go somewhere else. I'm going to hide my diary in my backpack and leave it here. Maybe someday someone will find it and know what happened to us. I want Grandpa Mike to know that we love him and we wanted to come home. I want to tell my teacher, Mrs. Patterson, that I tried to be brave like she taught us. I am very scared about what the man is going to do to us. Daddy is trying to be strong, but I can see in his eyes that he is scared too. If something happens to us, I want everyone to know that we were a happy family, and we loved each other very much. The forensic evidence found in the hidden room confirmed what Emma's diary had documented. DNA analysis revealed that all 4 family members had been present in the space for an extended period. Sarah Morrison's remains showed signs of illness and dehydration consistent with Emma's descriptions. The other family members had died from violence, confirming investigators' worst fears about how their captivity had ended. Armed with Emma's diary and the physical evidence from the hotel room, law enforcement agencies launched a massive manhunt for Marcus Wheeler. Database searches revealed that he had been living in Fort Collins under the assumed name Mark Watson, collecting disability payments and working occasional maintenance jobs while staying under the radar of authorities. On March 26, 2024, SWAT teams arrested Wheeler at his apartment. Initially, he denied any involvement in the Morrison family's disappearance, claiming he had never heard of them. However, when confronted with the overwhelming evidence from Emma's diary and the forensic analysis of the hotel room, Wheeler's facade crumbled. During his interrogation, Wheeler revealed the locations where he had buried the Morrison family's remains in remote areas of Roosevelt National Forest. He had scattered the burial sites to reduce the chances of discovery, but after 11 years, forensic specialists were still able to recover evidence that confirmed the identities of all 4 victims. Wheeler's confession revealed the full scope of his crime and the twisted logic that had motivated him to destroy 4 innocent lives. His termination from Mountain Peak Mining Corporation for financial fraud had filled him with rage and a desire for revenge against David Morrison, whom he blamed for ruining his career and personal life. I just wanted to make him pay for what he did to me, Wheeler told investigators during his confession. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone. I just wanted the company to give me the money they owed me for ruining my life. But everything went wrong, and then I couldn't let them go because they could identify me. The case that had puzzled investigators for 11 years was finally solved. Marcus Wheeler was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, extortion, and multiple other felonies related to his crimes against the Morrison family. At his trial, which lasted 3 weeks and drew national media attention, Wheeler showed no genuine remorse for his actions. He continued to blame David Morrison for the chain of events that led to the family's deaths, claiming that if David had not reported his financial improprieties, none of the tragedy would have occurred. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Wheeler was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 150 years for the kidnapping and extortion charges. For Michael Morrison, who had never stopped searching for his brother's family, the resolution brought both relief and renewed grief. "We always hoped that somehow they were still alive somewhere," he said during his victim impact statement at Wheeler's sentencing. "Learning the truth is devastating, but at least now we know what happened to them, and we can finally lay them to rest." The Morrison family was buried together in a ceremony attended by hundreds of community members who had followed their story for 11 years. Emma's diary was returned to the family and became a testament to the courage and love that had sustained them during their final days. The abandoned Pineview Hotel was completely demolished, and Rocky Mountain Resorts decided to build a memorial park on the site instead of the planned luxury resort. A bronze plaque honors the memory of David, Sarah, Jake, and Emma Morrison, and includes an excerpt from Emma's diary. "We were a happy family and we loved each other very much." The Morrison family mystery had finally been solved, but the terrible truth of what happened during those 3 weeks in the summer of 2013 would forever serve as a reminder of how quickly evil can destroy innocent lives, and how the courage of one small girl with a diary could ultimately bring justice and closure to those left behind.